Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NCPC's meeting on the Monumental Core Streetscape Guidelines. We're here today to talk about some recent work and to hear your questions and get your feedback. So I'm Elizabeth Miller, NCPC's Director of the Physical Planning Division, and Megan Dowker is going to present the Streetscape Design Guidelines to you. Excuse me. These guidelines are a result of a tremendous coordination and consensus building with 11 federal and local agencies, including a close collaboration between NCPC and the district. Together, we are developing important guidelines for streetscapes on streets of the highest national importance. This work is particularly important in Washington downtown's Monumental Core, where many of the federal and local jurisdictions come together. Here, beautiful and functional streetscapes contribute to the identity, character, comfort, experience, and the memory of public life in the nation's capital. Our work focuses on developing consistent and a cohesive palette of well-placed streetscape elements with durable materials to establish functional, clear, and coherent public spaces. This is the first of 2 public meetings where we're going to share our work and respond to your questions. You can submit your comments by going to our website and the Monumental Core Projects Initiative page, or you can also find a link to provide comments in the topic bar that's labeled Participate. The comment period closes May 11th. The public input will help shape our ongoing work to complete the guidelines, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Throughout today's presentation, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask a question at any time. We will also take a moment between topics for you to type in questions if you'd like. I will then moderate the questions and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. We do encourage you to submit your written comments by May 11th via our webpage. As I said, this will help us shape and start to refine and finalize these guidelines. And Megan will provide more information about that at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Beth. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. Today, the National Capital Planning Commission, or NCPC, is presenting the Monumental Core Streetscape Design Guidelines vertical and surface elements for public comment. Last month, NCPC released the draft guidelines for a 90-day public comment period, which closes May 11th. As Beth mentioned, this is the first public meeting during the comment period where staff will present an overview of the guidelines and respond to questions. Today, staff will provide an overview of the Monumental Core Streetscape project and present the draft Streetscape Design Guidelines. We'll review the vertical element guidelines, including streetlights and trees, and surface element guidelines, including landscapes and plantings, stormwater management, pavements, and pedestrian circulation, and then discuss our current work and next steps to advance guide and manual development. So first, I'll provide a brief overview of the project background and purpose. The Monumental Core Streetscape project is led by NCPC and is a multi-phased update of the 1992 Streetscape Manual. The purpose of the manual is to inform coordinated and consistent streetscape treatment for roadways in the central area of the city in the vicinity of the National Mall. Federal and local agencies both use the manual's details and hold regular working group meetings to coordinate streetscape projects. Additionally, NCPC and the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts, or CFA staff, use the Streetscape Manual during project review to ensure projects use consistent elements and materials. The manual and working group coordination is important for developing streetscape consistency across jurisdictions. The map on the left shows how several federal and local agencies use the manual to coordinate more than 25 road construction projects over the years, with Architect of the Capitol Roads in blue, District Department of Transportation roads in pink, and National Park Service roads in green. The current Interagency Working Group includes 11 federal and local agencies listed on the left who signed an MOU to advance components of the Monumental Core Streetscape project. The project components are being developed in close coordination with the working group and with input from agency experts such as arborists and lighting designers. The Monumental Core Streetscape project includes 4 components shown on the left: First, developing the urban design streetscape framework and lighting policy. Second, developing streetscape design guidelines. Third, updating the construction manual. And fourth, updating the Interagency Working Group MOU. These components will be packaged into a new streetscape guide and manual to inform the future character and quality of our civic streetscapes. In 2019 and 2020, we received commission comments and hosted 2 meetings to receive public comments on item number 1, the Urban Design Streetscape Framework and Lighting Policy. Today's presentation focuses on project component number 2, Streetscape Design Guidelines. This includes supplementing the manual's construction details with guidelines to provide federal and local agencies with guidance for coordinated and consistent streetscape treatments. Because the Urban Design Streetscape Framework is the foundation for the guidelines that we're discussing today, I'll provide a brief recap. So what you're seeing here is the framework showing street categories, including radiating and edging streets in bright pink, and connecting and traversing streets in light pink. This map also shows the Streetscape Guide and Manual boundary, which was expanded to add Banneker Park, the Kennedy Center and surrounding areas, and the East Street Northwest corridor. I'll note that our work includes 2 parts, inside and outside the boundary. Inside the boundary, the Interagency Working Group is developing the new Streetscape Guide and updating the manual. And outside the boundary, we signed an MOU with DDOT and DCOP. And this coordination is important for developing guidance for key streets that transition between federal and local areas. And this work will be packaged up into a companion streetscape review guide. To further describe the street categories, radiating and edging streets are those with national importance and symbolic meaning, which radiate from or edge nationally significant structures and open spaces. Connecting and traversing streets are those with national and local importance, which connect multiple nationally significant destinations. And local streets or the orthogonal grid streets that support and highlight the radiating diagonal avenues and provide connectivity and access. Overall, the Streetscape Framework and Lighting Policy strengthens the city's important views, supports streetscape consistency, reinforces unique precincts, and improves connections and relationships between the downtown monumental core and surrounding local areas. So now I'll present the Streetscape Design Guidelines for vertical and surface elements. The Streetscape Guide and Manual address many different elements within the streetscape, as is shown here. The Streetscape Framework categorizes these into vertical surface and small scale elements and organizes them along a spectrum of consistency depending on their street category. Generally, most consistency is desired among the vertical and surface elements, which shape streetscape corridors, frame vistas, and inform character. And generally, more variability is permitted among the small scale elements, which reinforce character area and neighborhood identity. These principles coordinate with the Urban Design Streetscape Framework's street categories to develop high and moderate streetscape consistency on the radiating and edging and connecting and traversing streets. Today, we'll focus on the vertical and surface element guidelines and briefly discuss our next steps on small scale elements. So first, I'll present the vertical elements. These are highlighted in yellow here and include streetlights and trees, which shape streetscape corridors and frame vistas. I'll begin with the streetlight guidelines. Streetlights are important because they express the framework of the capital city streetscapes and provide nighttime illumination for safety as well as ambiance and character. And we've organized the guidelines into these bulleted topics, which I'll overview. I'll note the following guidelines focus on streetlight fixture types, not the quality of light emitted from the streetlights. Lighting quality was broadly addressed in our lighting policy. The current Streetscape Manual specifies a limited streetlight fixture palette of historic twin 20s and Washington globes, which are found throughout the city, and Olmsted lights located only on the mall. Our work documents a more diverse streetlight palette and the existing range of streetlight pole heights. We also expanded the streetlight palette to include existing special streetlight fixtures. So for example, the Pennsylvania Avenue tiered suite of lights. We worked with federal and local partners to develop the proposed guidance, which adds details, including the fixture heights and spatial configurations. And I'll call your attention to the orange dots on the mall that indicate potential future crosswalk lighting fixtures, which I'll discuss next. To further the city's Vision Zero goals and to address concerns about inadequate lighting on the National Mall, we developed recommendations to improve mall panel crosswalk lighting. We worked with federal partners to develop recommendations that balance pedestrian safety and historic preservation, specifically maintaining the dimly lit character of the nighttime east-west vista along the mall's center panel. In summary, the guidelines support streetlight fixtures that unify the city streets, express the dignity of the federal city, highlight unique areas, and achieve a consistent palette on the National Mall while improving nighttime crosswalk lighting. Next, I'll discuss the street tree guidelines. Street trees are important because they frame vistas to important structures and open spaces and provide an array of environmental benefits. We've organized these guidelines into the bulleted topics here, and I'll highlight just a few. The current Streetscape Manual specifies disease-resistant American elms on the streets shown here in dark blue. This guidance does not address contemporary trends in arboriculture, which call for species biodiversity and improve resilience to pests and diseases. Our work focuses on the spatial quality of the tree canopy and how trees shape streetscape character, view sheds, and vistas. We're broadening the tree palette, considering tree health and recognizing trees as a complex system of living organisms. To improve tree canopy biodiversity and resilience, the guidelines promote consistent tree forms and mature heights to clearly frame views to important structures and open spaces. Focusing on tree form rather than a species broadens the tree palette on many monumental core streets, and it also minimizes the American elm and similar trees to the mall, where historic preservation is of highest importance. To expand the tree canopy in the monumental core and achieve the city's objective of 40% canopy cover by 2032, we looked at historic tree plans that called for multiple rows of trees and developed guidelines that encourage restoring a more robust canopy on these streets by working with federal and local partners and stakeholders. We also address tree box treatments. Current tree box protections have limited functionality for stormwater management in areas with high pedestrian foot traffic. To expand tree box functionality, improve visual consistency, and document existing conditions, including historic landscapes, the guidelines include bioretention tree boxes and identify a suite of visually compatible tree box options based on streetscape and landscape character and pedestrian volumes. In summary, guidelines support increasing tree canopy cover, selecting trees that reinforce streetscape views and improve the pedestrian experience, improving biodiversity and tree health, and enhancing environmental and human health. Next, I'll present the surface elements, which enhance vistas and inform streetscape character. These are highlighted in orange here and include landscapes and plantings, stormwater management, pavements, and pedestrian circulation. First, I'll discuss the landscape and planting guidelines. Landscapes and plantings are important because they unify streetscape character, enhance vistas, and provide environmental benefits. We've organized the guidelines into these bulleted topics, and again, I'll just touch on a few. The current Streetscape Manual specifies a limited landscape and planting palette consisting of mulched tree plantings and turf grasses. To establish a unified vision, proposed guidance identifies landscape character based on land uses and settings, sidewalk configurations, and degree of vegetated and tree planted open spaces. To enhance streetscape vistas and improve ecosystem health and biodiversity, proposed guidance identifies vegetation heights, generally shorter heights on the radiating and edging streets and taller heights in the connecting and traversing streets, and supports a greater diversity of plantings to include native and pollinator-friendly plants. In summary, guidelines support enhancing streetscape landscapes, improving soils for healthy trees and vegetation, and promoting native and pollinator-friendly plants. Next, I'll discuss the stormwater management guidelines. Stormwater management is important because it improves environmental quality, filters pollutants, and reduces strain on existing infrastructure. We've organized the guidelines into these bulleted topics here, and again, I'll just touch on a few. The current Streetscape manual only addresses gray infrastructure, such as catch basins and inlets. It does not provide guidance on current stormwater management best practices and techniques, including green infrastructure. Stormwater management guidelines consider contemporary environmental issues, such as the impact of extreme weather and localized flooding. Guidelines also expand on comprehensive plan policies and coordinate with federal and local stormwater regulations. To address contemporary environmental issues and incorporate current best management practices, or BMPs, proposed guidance identifies appropriate locations for stormwater BMPs based on urban design considerations. BMPs are largely encouraged and only limited in certain areas for visual, historic preservation, and functional reasons. In summary, guidelines support using BMPs to address flooding and water quality issues and to meet federal and local standards and regulations, protecting historic and cultural resources and aesthetic character, and ensuring proper stormwater facility maintenance. Next, I'll discuss the pavement guidelines. Pavement is important because it conveys streetscape character and facilitates circulation. Again, we've organized the guidelines into these topics, and I'll touch on a few. The current Streetscape manual specifies exposed aggregate sidewalk pavement, granite curbs, and either asphalt or red brick gutters. However, there are multiple sidewalk pavement and curb and gutter types in our area. Our work focuses on unifying pavement character, recognizing special areas, considering transitions on and off the mall, and addressing environmental issues. To address pavement character, proposed guidance carries forward the intent to use exposed aggregate on many monumental core streets. It also identifies where custom pavements highlights special and historic areas and reflects a more diverse palette that exists today. In summary, guidelines support unifying monumental core pavement character, enabling comfortable movement, simplifying material transitions and joints, and improving stormwater management and mitigating heat island effect. Next, I'll discuss the pedestrian circulation guidelines. These guidelines are important because they inform the space needed for comfortable and inviting pedestrian circulation. And we've organized the guidelines into the bulleted topics here, and I'll highlight a few. The current Streetscape manual addresses roadway classifications and identifies pedestrian ways, but it does not provide guidance on minimum space needed for pedestrians or how other modes interact with pedestrian space. By comparison, the district has guidance for sidewalk widths and space needed for pedestrian circulation. Additionally, since pedestrians as well as bicycles and other micromobility modes such as dockless scooters use the multi-use trails on the National Mall, coordinated guidance is needed regarding how other modes interact with pedestrian space. To address space needed for pedestrians and better convey how these spaces are utilized, proposed guidance identifies minimum widths for sidewalks and pedestrian clear zones and identifies designated multi-use trails and restricted access roads. Our guidance focuses on pedestrian circulation, not on transportation or curbside management, but our guidance does address how pedestrians and bicycles, scooters, and other micromobility modes interact on sidewalks, pedestrian paths, and multi-use trails. And this guidance is coordinated with federal and local plans and regulations. In summary, guidelines support enhancing circulation routes for safe, comfortable, and enjoyable pedestrian movement, providing access to unique destinations and events, ensuring consistent alignment and adequate size of pedestrian spaces, and coordinating pedestrian spaces with other streetscape zones and travel modes. In summary, the vertical and surface elements guide streetscape design character and physical quality, including the placement, configuration, and type of streetscape elements. And here are examples of how our guidance comes together in an illustrative street section. So this is a radiating and edging street example of Constitution Avenue Northwest, showing the double row of vase or spreading shaped trees, the twin 20 streetlights, and unified plantings and surface materials. This is a connecting and traversing street example of 12th Street Southwest, showing the single row of round-shaped trees and Washington globe lights. So I'll just wrap up quickly by discussing our current work and next steps, which are to continue guideline development for small-scale elements. We'll be addressing a lot of that street clutter when we get to that component. Secondly, to initiate the construction manual update, and third, to advance collaboration with the city on the companion Streetscape Review Guide. As a reminder, the Streetscape framework identifies the importance of streetscape consistency across character areas, which have their own unique identity and are shown here in color. As we develop small-scale element guidelines, we'll identify elements within the right-of-way that are important both for supporting streetscape consistency and unique character area identity. We'll also address furnishings and civic infrastructure. For furnishings such as benches and trash receptacles, we'll focus on updating these to meet our current needs and standards. And for civic infrastructure, things like fire hydrants or drinking fountains, we'll focus on addressing current technologies. I'll note that the small scale elements will inventory existing perimeter security elements as well. As we update the construction manual, we'll begin with pavements, and then in the future, we'll update the federal LED streetlight specifications in close coordination with DDOT's Smart Street Lighting Project. And as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, our work is broken into two parts, inside and outside the boundary. So outside the boundary, we're working with the district to develop the companion Streetscape Review Guide for key streets that transition between federal and local areas. We're currently developing pilot streetscape guidelines for 3 streets, 16th Street north of the White House, South Capitol Street, and Massachusetts Avenue. And we met with key stakeholders in February to collect their input on the draft guidelines. So in conclusion, the Monumental Core has beautiful, inviting, and functional streetscapes, and we're putting guidance in place to more consistently achieve this level of quality. The new Streetscape Guide and Manual will be used to achieve streetscape consistency across jurisdictions, inform interagency working group coordination, as well as NCPC and CFA staff review. So lastly, I'll discuss how you can comment. To download the draft guidelines, please go to our website on the Monumental Core Initiative page, and I've put the yellow web link here. To submit your comments as part of the formal written record, please visit our website under Participate, where you'll find our public comment opportunities and comment form. We will host a second public meeting on March 30th at 6 p.m. And as mentioned, the comment period runs through May 11th. So please make sure to get your comments in by then. So that concludes my presentation. We'll open it up for more Q&A. If you haven't already, please type your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm going to go ahead with some questions that have come in. The first is from Beth Purcell. Is there already an MOU with OP and DDOT?
Yes, there is. We put that in place a few years ago. So we do have that working agreement between the 3 agencies. And that's part of that companion Streetscape Review Guide scope of work.
Okay, another question from Beth. Please relate the historic city plans for trees to the current research on tree health.
Is that more of a question or a comment?
I think it's how the relationship, how does tree health relate to some of the city's historic city plans? So with those.
Right, I guess I hope I'm answering this in the way as intended, but a lot of the historic plans called for specific species, like for example, red maple, which our city has a lot of right now. So we're having to adapt some of the species selection to account for things like, invasiveness of certain trees, like Norway maple, for example. So we've modified the tree palette, but we are looking back to those historic plans, particularly for the intent to add that double row. Again, we're looking for areas where we can expand the tree canopy, and sometimes that means planting that second row, usually in what's called the public parking area, part of the public open space as part of the right of way. So we're particularly looking at those historic plans for guidance on where that second row can be included.
And Megan, you might want to talk just a second about how we're addressing the National Mall and the trees there.
Yes, that's another great area of focus. Traditionally, or historically, I should say, the National Mall has had elm trees, American elm trees planted there, which are susceptible to pests and diseases. So that's one in particular where, particularly the streets that edge the National Mall, where we're looking at a similar shape of tree, but also looking at modern hybrids that are more disease-proof and pest-proof, but still meet the same visual intent.
Okay, our next question is from Jeff Price, and his question is it a good idea to add protected bike lanes or transit lanes into the cross sections of these streets? I guess the question is, how are we addressing more of these mobility modes?
Right. So there again, our pedestrian guidelines closely coordinate with federal and district transportation plans. So DDOT, for example, has plans to put in place protected bicycle lanes in various parts of the city. So we're coordinating with district plans on that. And you'll find that most of the guidelines do reference DDOT plans and regulations.
And that essentially our guidelines are really addressing the pedestrian areas, not necessarily the transportation.
That's right.
But they are working to coordinate those.
Right, particularly on those multi-use trails where those are shared spaces, both by pedestrians, bicycles, and scooters.
Okay, I have another question from James. So he says, a number of the paved bike and paths are finally being widened and reconstructed, such as along the Potomac River by the Kennedy Center. How were these widths determined? So these might be more of in the transportation realm. So Megan, you are frozen. Okay, so thinking if I could have a clue from one of our technical, are we frozen or are we still alive?
Megan, I believe if you were to turn off your video, you might.
I have turned off my video.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Excellent. So going back to the question about how bicycle lane widths are determined. So yes, there are national standards, and that's typically what DDOT has adopted as their own city standards. So those are what are typically looked at to determine widths for protected bicycle lanes or multi-use trails, as they're often called.
Okay. Our next question is from Carol, and that is, what and who is the architect of the Capitol or the AOC on the list of parties and partners? So maybe that question is actually, what is AOC and who is that?
Right, so the architect of the Capitol is the entity that basically has jurisdiction over the Capitol grounds. So they are party to our MOU as part of the Interagency Working Group. So they represent the architect of the Capitol or Capitol grounds interests.
Okay, and we have 3 more questions at this point in time. The next is from Jeff. He says, thanks for a great presentation. We have a lot of competing needs on curbside management, and trees are extremely important from a transportation perspective. We've learned a lot from NCPC and DDOT, some of which is captured in the research, and then he's provided a link. So I I think that's more of just providing us with some information. So we will definitely follow up on that. The next question is from James, and it says the park path, the park path widening is necessary throughout the city. So I think he's making a comment that we need to look at park paths throughout the district. And Megan, do you want to address what we have the ability to include in our work?
Can I ask a clarifying question by park path? Is that pedestrian circulation route, including sidewalks and trails?
It's not specific, but that's how I'm interpreting it. Yes.
And can you
Yeah.
ask the question once more? So
I think it's really a statement. And so the question is where and how do we address park path widths? He's making a suggestion that we need to look at these throughout the district.
Okay.
I just thought we could clarify where we have jurisdiction.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So DDOT and NPS share, depending on the area, they have jurisdictional purview over the width of park, what I'll call them, pedestrian walking ways and sidewalk widths. So generally our guidance, because it's coordinating both with Park Service and DDOT standards, generally our guidance looks at park widths and establishes minimum widths based on land uses and densities, since that really determines how many feet are out there on the ground. So that's broadly how we've addressed it in our guidelines.
Okay, and then the final question thus far is from Christina. And I think it's a statement or question: is any permanent streetscape plans for historic Anacostia as far as cherry blossoms are concerned, etc.?
Historic Anacostia, that's outside of our study area. So we have not addressed that portion of the city.
Okay. So those are the questions. Let's see, we have, another one's just came in. Are the 1992 guidelines on NCPC's website?
Great question. Yes, they are. If you go to our Monumental Core project webpage, down at the bottom, there are additional resources, and there is a link to the current Streetscape manual, which was originally developed in 1992. What you see on our website is a 2013 update.
And we've had a couple of questions come in previously that I think might be helpful that I'll go ahead and ask. And is that, how will the guidelines address sort of the evolving technologies like car charging stations, Internet of Things, etc.?
Yeah, so that's something that we'll really be deeply diving into when we get to our small scale elements. We'll be addressing the topics of furnishing and civic infrastructure. Civic infrastructure is kind of a catch-all category that will deal with a lot of things like communications technologies, car charging stations, so EV related technologies and so forth. So that is forthcoming.
Great. So that concludes the questions that we've received. Let's see, a new question just came in. Are the manual and guidelines likely to increase the amount of tree canopy per the objectives? That's from Carol.
Great. Yes, that is the intent. Again, just to clarify jurisdictions, NPS and DDOT are really the jurisdictional authorities that have implementation authority. But the plans that we've put in place, that's exactly the intent, is to join the district in a shared goal to increase tree canopy cover.
And the next question is, and I'm going to add how, so will and how the guidelines address public transit space, for example, bus stops?
Yes, so I'll say that again, we're coordinating closely with the MPS and DDOT transportation plans, which specify bus stop locations and design. So our pedestrian circulation guidelines coordinate with those various aspects.
Okay, so that is all of the questions we've received thus far. We can wait a few more minutes if anyone has any additional. In the meantime, Megan, why don't you put up the slide that includes our the links to our webpage and where they can provide their comments. Anyone have any other questions they'd like asked? I know if we were in person, it'd be a little more interactive and we could have more of a discussion. But we are happy to answer your questions and also look forward to hearing your feedback as our comment, during the public comment period. So that concludes our presentation. We still have quite a number of participants with us, so we are happy. Just had another question come in or a statement, but we're happy to stay on as long as you all are on in case other questions come up. Actually, Carol has a comment, just a comment that I thought it was useful to contrast the current and proposed. So I think that was helpful in the presentation. Thank you for that feedback. It's always good to know. Also, if there's any of the information that Megan talked about where you'd like to see, one of the maps again, or any of the visuals, please type that in and we're happy to go back to that as well. We still have a number of participants with us. Again, we're happy to stay on as long as you are. Actually, the question came in about the character areas. Are the character areas generally understood and recognized somehow? Maybe Megan, you might want to explain how we came up with those areas.
Sure, and I'll go back to the slide for visual reference. Yes, so we have mapped out the boundaries of these character areas, and these are supplemented by some pretty substantial descriptions that capture both the historic significance and how these different character areas or precincts function today in terms of land use. But I'll say that again, the intent for the character areas is that these describe the broader urban design, architectural, and landscape character of the space rather than jurisdictional areas. And these really work hand in hand. This is all laid out in our urban design streetscape framework, but these work hand in hand with the streetscape categories or street categories, recognizing that the character areas beyond the right-of-way do influence the visual characteristics and feeling of the space when you're within the public space of the right-of-way.
Megan, do you want to maybe talk a second about how, we're looking at now for comments on our vertical and surface elements, and then how we'll be proceeding with small scale, just kind of recap how we will work with that, and then the construction manual, and then ultimately publishing the final document?
Sure. Gosh, I guess it's not easy to go all the way back to the beginning.
You might have to put, you could take it out of presentation mode.
Scroll up here. There we go. Right. So basically our work plan to update the manual and complete the guide has these different components. So as I mentioned, we're done with number 1. We're about 2/3 of the way done with number 2, the design guidelines. We're starting to initiate the streetscape construction manual update. And that is what you can find on our website, the 1992-2013 version of the streetscape manual. So once the guidelines are done and the manual is completed, we'll be taking that to our commission for review. And at that point, we'll, the document will essentially be concluded, and these guides can be put into place for use by various agencies. So I guess all that is to say the small scale element development will continue on through this year. We'll be working on that. We'll also be taking public input on the guidelines and incorporating that when we develop the final streetscape design guidelines package, hopefully later this year or early next year.
So you will have an opportunity to review and comment on those small scale elements as well. And I think that maybe the other thing that might be interesting to our folks in the crowd is that the Interagency Working Group, as Megan mentioned earlier, has been working together for a couple of decades now. Before we started the guideline work, the agencies met on a quarterly basis to essentially coordinate projects along these various streets within this area. And because many times, you want to coordinate the work, so one agency doesn't come in and then another agency might come in and need to do something in addition. So to kind of make that a more efficient process, but also how we could retain consistency. And that's where that manual really has come in, has been very important in helping guide the agencies to use a consistent palette or a consistent construction specifications in this case, when working within this area. Because there are some areas within the monumental core where one side of the street might fall within a federal jurisdiction and the other side of the street will fall within the district's jurisdiction. And so that's how, that's really kind of sums up why these guidelines are important, so that we have the continuity for the entire streetscape. So there are no other questions have come in. We still have quite a few with us. So anyone have any other questions or like to see any other part of the presentation? Maybe we'll take about another 5 minutes, and then if not, I think we can probably adjourn.
Beth, we do have a hand raised, and although
Okay.
not how we were usually taking questions, but I can allow Christina to speak.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. I didn't see the hand raised. Christina, if you might want to unmic and answer your question or make a comment.
Maybe a mistake. Carol also has her hand raised.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead, and since we've got a manageable number of people, we can, is it okay, Paul, to go ahead and give them change their status so they can speak?
Sure. Carol, if you have a question, you can ask it.
Thank you. I was wondering if the small scale elements work is going to address things like street signs and parking signs and all the other miscellaneous stuff that, kind of clutters up the visual environment?
Carol, thank you for the question. Yeah, so when we get to small scale elements, what we intend to do in terms of what we're calling wayfinding signs is an inventory and an assessment. So just as we've scoped out the work, we will not be developing guidelines per se for various wayfinding signs. And this kind of is because of the multiple jurisdictions that are in the area, but we will do an assessment.
And the purpose of that assessment, Megan?
Right, so yeah, so the assessment will broadly identify what is working and what's not working. So some pros and cons for the existing conditions, basically.
And then with the intent to provide guidance that could lead to a future work plan for one of the particular jurisdictions, or at least in how we look at things when new signage is coming in for approval, or we get submittals for applications for signage. John Fondersmith had his hand up, I believe. Paul, can you tap in, John?
John, if you turn on your mic, you can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. One of the problems in going through this material is that it's not clear how much of it is more or less settled, that everybody's working with this is essentially satisfied with it. And what are the new things? Can you give us an idea roughly of what that ratio is? I mean, I obviously not time to identify all those, but just what the ratio is. And granted, somebody may have a problem with, anything, but what would you say? And I'm talking about among the agencies that are working on this or have worked on this.
Thank you, John, for the question. So, we haven't, done any calculations on new versus, well, I would say existing information. I think a big part of what we're doing is consolidating and coordinating existing policies, guidance, regulations, and so forth. So it's a real mix of new and just coordinating what we have today. I guess in terms of identifying, I think our presentation did walk through kind of the current 1992 to 2013 guidance offered in the manual, and then how we are modifying and improving guidance based on that. So that might be the most direct way to answer your question.
Okay.
I think that maybe the other question is the agencies have been working very closely and diligently through all of these issues. And, at least at this point, we believe, best of our knowledge, that we've actually got consensus on this between the various agencies. That doesn't mean that the public input is not important. We need the public input to hear what the public thinks. And then if there's things that we get feedback on that we might need to take back to our working group, which includes all of those 11 agencies, we will work it through and hopefully find a way to solve it for all parties involved. So they've had a lot of input into getting us to this point, to this far.
Okay.
And I think part of, as Megan said, just to reiterate, a lot of this is we're not reinventing new guidance. Much of it is actually contained in a lot of different places within either the district's purview, or maybe things that the Smithsonian or the Park Service has done as a practice. And so what we're doing is taking all of that and trying to coordinate it and come up with a consistent way of using and applying all of these different standards. And we did find some gaps. And where we found gaps, we are trying to fill those gaps, with these guidelines. I don't know, Megan, do you have an example of what one of those gaps might have been? I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's gaps and also like some tailoring. So for example, one of the things we focused on was improvements to the design of the crosswalks on the mall. So rather than have, crosswalks at the corner of the curb radius kind of pointing you to the middle of the intersection, we're looking at having perpendicular crosswalks at all four corners. So that's nothing new per se. It's within federal and district standards, but we're just making some refinements and tailoring for our study area. I guess another gap that comes to mind are things like utility boxes or streetlight signalization boxes. So finding a better placement or alignment to those so that they're kept out of the pedestrian zone. So those are just a couple examples.
And we did a very extensive analysis before we even started the framework, looking at not only district regulations, but all of the bids too. What guidance or what guidelines the business improvement districts used. And I've just another example of what we found is that Massachusetts Avenue, which is outside our boundary, but it is incorporated into part of the companion guide that we're working on with the district, that runs through several different business improvement districts. So what we did is looked at how all of those districts and the city looked at how to treat Massachusetts Avenue. And because that's an important diagonal within the city, we are preparing a guideline or trying to compile all of those different guidelines into something that can be used consistently along that street. So just as another example of some of the things that we've run into as we've done this work and things that we're trying to solve for. And we've met with all the business improvement districts that touch upon or within this area. We've had some very good meetings with them, gotten some good feedback and input. So they've been part of this process as well. I don't see any other questions. It's almost 1:30. So unless anyone has a last minute raise of their hand, I think we can adjourn. I want to thank everyone for attending, for sticking through this, for the questions you have. And Megan, if you could put up one more time as we sign off here, our website and where they can submit their comments, that would be helpful. So please, you can go to our website. In the top bar, you'll see two areas. One is a planning category. If you hit that tab, it'll take you down and there's a subcategory called the Monumental Core projects. If you click on that, this will take you to everything you wanted to know about the 1992 guide and the work we're doing to date. There's also another tab at the top of NCPC's website that's called Participate. If you click that, that will be a drop-down menu that will take you to events, which takes you to the public meeting dates, and you can also submit comments there. So we are taking comments through May 11th, and again, any feedback we get will help us refine and finalize the guidelines that Megan has overviewed today. So with that, we'd like to thank you for joining us. Everyone have a great day.